Hello, everyone. Blessed manifestations. Welcome to Young Folks in Politics. Thank you for joining us on this gloomy Saturday, but hopefully, when we're done with this panel, you'll feel invigorated and ready to vote. Before we start, I want to let everyone know that our programming is made possible with support from Avangrid Foundation. And today's panel is additionally sponsored by CT Humanities. Before we dive in, we'd like to do a land acknowledgement. And we'd like to acknowledge the land that we are hosting this program on. The New Haven Pride Center was founded and operates on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, the Mashantucket Pequot, the Eastern Pequot, the Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Passaquot, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac peoples. We hope that from wherever you are, that you take a moment to acknowledge and honor the land that you are, the Native and Indigenous folks whose land you are on, and the history of the place you are in. Find out more about your native lands and where your native lands are at that email address right there, native-land.ca. And so, again, my name is Allah. My pronouns are she and her. I am the youth program officer here at New Haven Pride Center, and I'm so excited you can join us for our panel today. Again, it is called Young Folks in Politics. It is more than just an election. And so with that, I want to bring on one of our first panelists for you today. I'm gonna have Maisie come on and join us.
Hello.
Hey, Maisie. How are you doing? Want to take some time to share your pronouns, introduce yourself to these beautiful people?
Well, I'm Macy. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I wrote so much about myself in my bio, and now I'm just completely forgetting everything that I said. I am a non-binary queer person. There's a lot of words I would use to describe myself because I think like every day I feel like I'm something else. So queer just kind of covers it. I'm disabled and I'm a sign language interpreter to be. as soon as my education is done, that's the path that I'll be going on. But I'm extremely passionate about politics and voting, and I wouldn't be if it wasn't such an essential thing in our lives. I didn't used to always be so involved in politics. I actually used to say I never wanted to vote. But as I got older, I learned better.
Same. So much of that, from waking up and feeling like you're a different part of you every day to like used to like really be misinformed, saying that like, oh, who cares about voting? But now I understand why we were kind of thinking that, you know. Yeah. But I want to bring on our next panelist for today, Maxwell.
Hello,
hey, Maxwell.
Hello, beautiful people. So as Alice said, my name is Maxwell Gamboa. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a student in New Haven. I've been raised in the New Haven area my whole life. So it's, it's kind of like my home, I love nature, and I feel like Connecticut has a lot of nature to offer, so like we can really learn something. And I am also passionate about politics and voting because I feel like young people, especially, like we see the consequences of, older people's vote. But we'll get into that.
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much. And actually, leads me into our first grounding question. Like, I am way older than both of you folks. And also I have a teenager who's 16, and I very much so remember being both of you folks' age, and feeling like folks made a lot of decisions for me at both of those points where you folks are, where your age demographic are, feeling like folks were making decisions for me without ever asking me. And so my first question leads into, how do you feel about the new, some of the new campaigns, some of them local, that are trying to shift the voting age to 16?
If I can go first, if that's all right with everyone. So I did think about this because I read it on like the little briefing about this. So I feel like people always hold teens to be like more mature and more responsible. Like they are being held accountable for more things that we might not even experience. So I feel like if we do like lower the voting age, then I think teens are ready because a lot of them have done so much online for like movements and stuff. But I feel like, like if these politicians really want to do that, then they should try to like connect with the teenagers, like learn why we want to lower these voices and what the teenage voices are. Because I feel like a lot of them are suppressed because like, as they might see them mature in other ways, but think, oh, you're too young to vote. But that's not the case because we're living through this. Like we're going to have to deal with the actions of that people vote for. So, that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah. That's exactly what I would say too, is I remember being 16 and the president of my GSA in high school, actually. And I get that teenagers, not all of the teenagers possess the maturity to be ready to vote, but I think that is more, that doesn't mean that we should prevent them from doing it. Because if the policies affect young people, then they should have a say. If they're not represented to things that apply to them, that's kind of bogus. They should have a voice. Like, things impact teenagers. Like you get to vote for things like education funding and sports funding and that kind of stuff. And that directly impacts young people. So I think it's a good idea to lower the voting age.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I want to shout out all of our followers and everyone joining us on Twitch, joining us on YouTube and Facebook. We see you. Keep commenting. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. We see them. Our tech support will make sure that I get them if we skip past it. So thank you to everyone joining us out in the virtual world. Share your questions, share your comments. And so thank you, because something that both of you folks brought up is, and something that's deeply for me connected to our panel that we had yesterday, which was Gen Z, and like how do we build community and how we just live in. And one thing I've noticed in doing the research between my generation and you folks' generation is that you folks' generation are more with it, because the folks in the generation before us left us in such like a upheaval, right? And then you see all of us clamoring to take care of everything, and y'all folks are just more aware. Sometimes I think not because you want to, but because you have to.
Yeah.
I think the most that I've actually learned about queer identity has been through my young folks who I support, and my children that have adopted me and I've adopted them, more so than like the people my age and stuff. Because I feel like we're really confused still. Like
you're confused, but you got the spirit.
Right. It was just 10 more years. And so thinking about your queer identities and then the other intersections of your identities, why is it important for you to vote and or like share in the community with people, encourage people to vote? For you personally, Max and Macy.
It's life or death. It's literally life or death.
Yes.
I am biologically female, so I receive the privileges and oppression of that. I'm non-binary, I'm queer, I'm disabled. The privilege I have going for me is my socioeconomic class and my skin color, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. So if I don't vote, and if I don't contribute to attempting to elect certain people into positions of power, those people have direct power over what happens with my life. Mm-hmm. Which to me is unfortunate that they have that much power and that we have less freedom than we think we do. But especially this election, it's life or death. I'm like, I don't think a lot of populations in this country are going to be able to stand another 4 years of the current president. And that's like, I know this isn't propaganda or anything for any certain candidate, but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Your feelings are completely valid. So I kind of like by my skin tone, I'd say I have the privilege of that and being like biologically female. But I wasn't as like in a high class, so I was like raised in lower class. So like I guess that passion is like from being raised in that lower class and like as a son of an immigrant, it's like so like being biracial and stuff, and then my queer identity comes in. So like I feel like people need to know young voices and young queer voices to see like who the choices you're making while voting, who will that impact? Because I feel like when people vote, they think of themselves or maybe like the people around them, but if they're older, like the people around them aren't our age, so it's like they really need to connect with the young queer voices and listen to them, because I feel like listening will really change like the future of politics, just listening.
And I agree with you. Like, I think they need to listen more, because eventually, this is something I always thought about growing up, was young people don't see themselves represented in politics because we're not old enough to be in politics. We're not old enough to take on positions of power. But eventually, when millennials and Generation Z are in their 40s and 50s, we're going to make up, hopefully, the majority of the positions of power, say Congress, Senate, House of Representatives, presidency, even potentially the presidency. So eventually we're going to see people in our age group in politics, even though we can't now. But we can make our voices heard now, so that the politics follow a direction that sets us up for when we're old enough to be in those positions of power.
Mm-hmm. And and that brings me to one of my next questions, because I like kind of want to jump around with like 4 questions that came out. Like I want to ask them next, but I think what I want to go to is locally here in Connecticut, and specifically Hamden and in New Haven, I'm lucky enough to call 2 city council folks that are actually younger than me. They ran, one Justin Farmer in Hamden, who was amazing and just ran for Senate, and very conveniently, although something that, in my opinion, and Ala Ashumare's opinion, and no one else's, I feel what happened with that election closely follow what happened in the last presidential election, whereas the person who won the popular vote still lost the election. And that's what happened with Justin, whereas he had folks who never voted to vote, or who had not really paid much mind to vote in that particular demographic of a city council person, of the state senate, and vote, and he still lost. And so that leads me into like, how do we support more young folks? Because certain positions of power, y'all, each one of you, Max, I think next year you'll be able to like run for like city council people, but there are things that y'all can run for. I'm really curious as to what do y'all think, and I'm actually going to take notes. What do y'all think younger folks need in ways of support to begin to want to run for things like city council at 18, when they're able to, or 20 or 21 or 22 like you, Macy?
I didn't know that you could do that at that age. So education, I think, is the first thing. I didn't know what the minimum age was to run for certain positions. And it's also like education, what positions you have locally. Like in my town, we have a first selectman. Some people have a mayor. Some people have this, that, or the other thing, city council. Like there's all different sorts of structures of local government. And so if people don't even know what kind of local government they have, they're powerless to make any choices regarding it. Like I didn't know until literally just now that you can run for some public offices at 18 years old.
Yes.
Did not do that. And I'm 4 years away from 18. I was 18 4 years ago, and I haven't known that.
Yeah. I didn't know until Justin was talking, and he was talking about his age when I first met him, and I was like, it was like really inspiring. And so, Max, do you have any ideas? I'm definitely taking
Yeah, so I know Justin because he actually visited my law class last year. So I got to connect with him and talk to him, love Justin, But I just feel like education, as Macy said, is so important because like I didn't know that, I just learned that I could do that. And I do want to do that. I feel like I would like to run in the future if I can. And I feel like support is another thing. Like support from older generations is another thing, because of course, like Gen Z and stuff will hype up this younger one, but like maybe an older generation, like maybe some advice or something, because if that makes yes, a mentor, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And just like don't treat them like just because they're younger than you doesn't mean that like you should treat them like they're little, so like like respect them as they're an adult because they're doing the same thing that you are doing. They are running the same exact campaign that you are doing, so respect, I think, because it takes a lot, because then you have college. If you're going to college, you're running, so in my opinion, I feel like those things could definitely be good for young people who want to run in campaigns in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to double on mentorship because I just thought to myself, well, if I did want to run for any kind of public office, where would I even start? And I don't know the answer to that question. And there are people who have had some experience doing this who can help advise the younger people on to do it, because also for a young person to be taken seriously, we have to perform as well as if not better than someone older than us to be taken. We have to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. And add on to that, if you have any sort of privilege points missing, say if you are a young person of color, a young disabled person, a young queer person, you have to work that much harder to be taken seriously. And so helping young people know what the process is and what they need to do to run for some kind of office like that will help them make fewer mistakes doing so, which will help them, I think, be taken more seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and help their confidence too in that. And if you have confidence, then you're more likely to succeed and achieve things.
Yes. And so for me, what I hear is like what I wrote down. One of the things I wrote down was like, older folks willing to not practice ageism, listen to young folks' expertise. I think, and as well as like creating educational tracks for young folks to know about, local positions and understanding local government, and also just like regular human support, like listening to each other and younger folks and moving more intergenerationally. And that definitely leads me into as young folks, what is it that you think that you can do to mend some of that, knowing that this is a two-sided mending? How do young folks move, and how do we begin to incorporate ourselves into voting registration, running? What are your ideas on how to get young folks into stepping into it just a little bit more? What do you think that we could do to encourage young folks that this is their thing?
May I go first? Just like putting up a little pinky. So I think definitely advocacy, because this is my opinion. This is Maxwell Gamboa's opinion, but I feel like if we are able to send in the National Guard like freshman year for high schoolers to recruit them, then we can definitely send state legislators to help recruit people to register. And this is my opinion. This is my opinion. Don't get, but it's like if we can send that to them and make them enlist into our state to protect it, then we can enlist people to protect our state politics, in my opinion. So, so I definitely think that. And then, like what Justin did, like Justin visiting our class, like kind of unlocked something in me. Like, wow, I can run. He's so young, like he is just somebody from Brantford, I think. I'm sorry, Justin, but like Hamden, I'm sorry. Hamden, he's somebody from Hamden who goes to school and like, but he's still doing this. So I think that is definitely really important, like advocacy, and for voting specifically, just like letting people know how important this is, because I feel like they don't see a lot of themselves. Like younger generations don't, like in ads and stuff, don't really see themselves in it. So maybe we can do that too. Be like, this is not like a presidential election, but you live here. This is your home, like New Haven, Hamden, wherever. Like this will impact you, you know, if that makes sense.
Yes, all the sense.
And especially with the midterm elections, I remember, so my first time voting was in 2016 because I was eligible for the primary because I was turning 18 by the presidential election. And it was my first year of college when I voted in 2016 in the presidential election, and the line was out the door. And when I voted in the midterms in 2018 at the same campus, the line was not even out the door of the room.
Wow.
And so I think people also aren't aware of the importance of the local elections. Honestly, in my opinion, I think the local elections and the midterm elections are even more important because the president's just one person, and it's a whole administration. But the president is just one person who defers to the other, or is supposed to defer to the other sections of the government. And so I think people just don't even know where to start because they don't have the knowledge of what the positions even are. But Max, what you were saying about, bringing in people to encourage voting and stuff, my university leading up to elections has people table to register to vote. You can just walk right by, and that's how I registered to vote when I moved to Pennsylvania. There was somebody tabling in the building that I had a class in, and I said, "Hey, I want to vote. Can I do that? Can I, even though?" And I had to ask them questions because I'm like, I'm not a Pennsylvania resident. Can I vote in Pennsylvania? I didn't even know the answer to that question, and they had all the answers. And I've also seen people do the same thing on social media. I have a friend from Long Island who posts all the time on Instagram resources for how to register to vote. She'll tell people, text me if you need to register to vote, if you need to come up with a voting plan. She's like, I have she took it upon herself to get as much information as she could for as many states as she could to help. And she's individually gotten, I think, over 15 people to register to vote. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sound like a lot, but if everybody did that would be a lot of people.
Yes.
Wow, 15. Yes. That was 15 less people who weren't registered before.
And some local elections come down to numbers like that.
Yes.
The first election in my town came down to, I want to say, about 30 people. I can't remember the exact, but it was pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could be wrong, but.
I mean, but sometimes, like, the local elections, it really does come to that. And so I have a question. I wanted to pivot, and then I'm going to pivot back, but I have ADD, so it comes out in my questions too. How do y'all feel about voter suppression? And have y'all, what are your opinions on what are you seeing show up as voter oppression? What are you identifying as voter oppression, and what you're seeing in your lived experiences?
The closure of voting locations. Yes. Yep. Yes. If there is a highly populated area or geographically large area that only has one or two voting locations, I think that's voter suppression. If people have to take off work to vote, if people have to travel very far to vote, if people have to wait in lines for hours and hours to vote because there's only one polling place, that's not cool.
Yeah.
I've seen news companies and other things parked or taking up handicap parking, which is also another form of voter suppression.
Right.
Even if it's not intentional, it's voter suppression.
And
illegal, but
if we think about unintentional isms, right, and like how folks who treat differently able folks, like just by taking up their parks, like the erasure of us, and that they don't even realize that they're participating in voter suppression.
Yeah,
but they are.
Like I have this isn't about voting, but I have an example of how that specific instance has happened to me because I have handicap parking and I use it. I was taking an exam on my campus, and so it's near graduation time, so they're setting up for graduation during that week. And the company that was setting up for graduation parked in all of the handicap spaces that were near the building I was taking the exam in, which meant I had to drive all the way around the campus again because there's no through route, and find another spot to park in and run over to the building and get in. And I was late for the exam, and they ran out of exams and had to print more. And I was one of the last people to get the exams because I was late.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a type of discrimination that I'm sure wasn't intentional, but they did break the law by taking up those spaces without having a placard.
Mm-hmm.
And in consequence had that effect on me. So imagine if that happened to a disabled person who went to go vote.
Oh yeah, they would just be like, you know what, forget it. I've rode around this block 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
I can't sit in the car for too long anyway, because some people are differently able where they have to get up and sit down and get up and sit down.
Yeah.
And
some people can't stand in long lines like that too. Like I wouldn't be able to make it in an 8-hour line.
Yeah.
You know?
I have AD. I have a privilege and even my differently ableness where I just have, and I say just, but meaning like looking at the spectrum of folks who are differently abled.
Mm.
It's hard for me to stand in a line for 5 minutes. Like I go through a gambit of emotions. I'm ready to go. No matter what it is, I can be waiting for my medicine to save myself and take care of myself. And sometimes I'll still leave because it's just too much. And then now with COVID, people are like, you're like 6 feet, and you're like getting closer, and like you're like the anti-maskers, and like it's just a lot, you know. So and thinking about, you know, points of the way COVID has also created easier ways of voter suppression, where there are, in this election, there are 21,000 fewer polling places in the United States than there were in the last in the 2016 election, and that's a 20% drop of polling places. And you would think that there would be an increase just so that folks can spread out more, but there's a decrease. And
in the mail system too.
Man.
Yeah.
Oh man, there have been stories of in smaller elections where folks they see police chiefs and things like that walking out with ballots in a bag on their shoulder, and you know, it sounds like a bad story, or you know, but that's actually happening in Connecticut and a bunch of other places. And so let me go, let's see. Okay, that leads me to another question about bipartisanship and like just the two parties. And for me, I really been struggling with how I'm gonna vote, because like I feel like my Black, queer, differently abled organizer self is not identified in either one of these two bipartisanship things. Still knowing I have to vote either.
Yeah. I know the feeling.
So what are your thoughts on that? How do y'all feel about this two-party oppression that we're forced into? I'm curious to hear young folks and what y'all folks think about that.
I'm just gonna raise my hand. Okay. So like for decades, it has always been like Democrat versus Republican. You know, it's like and in my opinion, both sides, there are both issues. And as you said, like neither candidate represents you at all. So like, why are we focusing on these two? You know, but then when people vote for a third party, they're like, and then they get slandered for it. People are like, that was a waste of a vote, even though voting in its constitutional right is for anyone. It's not just for Republican or Democrat. So I feel like we need more support for these other parties, because American politics was not built on just Democrat and Republican, because like the parties are switch and go, like they change throughout like decades. You know, maybe that's just me as a history buff, but they have. So it's like, why have we been sticking to these two parties, like forcing people to just pick one, even though they're not represented at all, you know? And then that just causes people to not vote, because then they don't want to vote. And then, you know, so as a young person, I try to be educated of all parties, you know, and it's hard. It is hard, because then it's like, you know, I cannot imagine the stress who of people voting might feel right now, because they have to kind of like pick a party or like pick a candidate, and like that's a lot of stress. So like, you know, so I send my support to everyone who wants to do that as a young person. But again, I feel like education is the best, and like knowing that like two sides, like they both have their problems. Like one, like I don't know, like just, you know, if that makes sense.
I think I have a slightly different opinion, and maybe it's just I spend a lot of time with some Gen X folks that are my parents who are a little bit more central, like a little more on the center end of politics. But the fact of the matter is, one of two people is going to be the president. Yeah. That's what's going to happen. It's either going to be Trump or Biden, because we know sadly that third party usually doesn't work because unfortunately we do have a bipartisan system. And so I think I've heard the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the metaphor that voting isn't like a marriage, but it's like public transportation. It's not who you're stuck with for the rest of your life, but you're trying to get as close as you can to your goal. And if one of the parties is closer to your goal, even if it's not all the way there, you take that train. And so, like, I think voting is just first. A lot of people see voting as the end all to solving problems. And I think it's almost a non-action at this point. I mean, it's still really important, but it's such a baby first step that it's like everyone should vote, and then there's so much more work to do after that, like dismantling the bi-party system or dismantling potentially the American government. But that's just my opinion.
Completely agree with that. Like, yes, like completely.
One of them is going to be the president. And in my personal opinion, one of them is way worse. One of them is way more dangerous. One of them has 4 years of being way more dangerous. And whether people vote or not, one of them is going to be the president. And so I think like if someone has the ability to make, if everyone can hear that message, I think more people would vote.
I agree. And I love that metaphor, by the way, because that's exactly how I feel. So like you just described it perfectly. You know, and you're right. Like, this isn't like the end of all worlds. You know, there is still like state, town elections. Yeah. So, like, you know,
there's still the midterms. You know, and it's also voting for the president isn't just a vote for the president. It's for that president's administration and cabinet.
Yes.
And you know, it's for a potential Supreme Court judge or two. You know, it's for all the people that the presidential administration is going to implement into the other systems of politics. Because really the president has some power, but they're really more just the leader figure for the country. And most of the power decisions come from the people who work under them. And so if that's not enough to get people to vote, I don't know what else is. But I think people just don't know that. I didn't know that when I voted the first time. I didn't know that I was voting not only for the president, but for, like, even on the ballot, there's other things you can put in, especially if it's a midterm, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say that. And doing my research for our panel today, I also found it actually very scary. It's not a statistic that most folks don't know, but in the 2016 election, the same amount of people who voted for either Clinton or Trump didn't vote at all.
That's terrible.
It was like half and half, like 51% of people did not vote at all. And that's really scary, right? Because, you know, up until Obama, really felt an understanding the presidency and what that meant. Like, I was like, oh, this is a farce, it doesn't matter, you know. And then seeing we have this black president, and then there's like unfortunate narrative that, okay, we have a black president now, racism and all the other isms are done in the world, and it's like, actually it's gotten worse. And then we have now this regime who is even tripled or quadrupled in intensity of the isms: racism, anti-queerness, anti-women, anti-trans, anti-black, just like all the anti-human aspects of humanity we're really seeing an influx of. And so why do you think that there are still so many people, even with this regime that we're in right now, why do you think that it's still almost, polls are saying it's about that same amount of folks who are still saying they're not going to go and vote? Why do you think it is? Why aren't folks voting?
I would love to know the demographics of people who aren't registered to vote. Because I do wonder if there would be a trend, because the people in my life who have in the past been very flippant and nonchalant about politics have tended to be people with more privilege.
Yeah, I was about to say privilege is like
and some of them it was out of naivety. Like some of them just didn't know. A lot of young people, especially, their first exposure to politics is politics, schmolitics. You know, it's boring, it's uncomfortable, it makes people angry. They see their family fight over it before they even understand what it means, so they don't want to get involved. So it comes across as an attitude of, oh, I don't even want to get involved. I don't like politics. Politics is just a bunch of angry people yelling about stuff. When in reality, politics is, if you enjoy having clean air to breathe, you care about politics. If you enjoy having good food to eat, you care about politics. If you love a queer person, you do care about politics. It's unfortunate that that has become politics. That should just be basic human passion for each other, but that's what it's turned into.
Beautifully said. My goodness. But I completely agree. It is like the privilege of like not, how do I explain it? So like, if someone has had things all their life, let's say like a certain privilege, they're like, well, I don't want to deal with politics because it stresses me out, or like it puts that person accountable. It's like, this is what other people have to deal with, and like, you know, this is politics. Or like, you know, like breathing clean air, it's like they might feel uncomfortable, or you know, like they're like, so I'm not gonna vote, I'm not gonna deal with it. But the fact is you have to, because like if you don't confront it, someone else will. Like someone else will do your vote for
if
either
you don't vote, somebody else will.
Exactly. You know, so it's like, it's just privilege. It's like, it's majority privilege in my opinion. And maybe
I've seen a very powerful political cartoon that was two groups of people separated by a line, and one was a smaller group and one was a bigger group. And the smaller group was people who voted, and the bigger group had a speech bubble that said, we didn't vote because our vote wouldn't make a difference. And that group of people was bigger than the people who voted in the political cartoon. And I think also, I do wonder if the American individualist culture plays into it.
Yes. Oh,
because if someone personally feels satisfied with an administration, they may be less likely to vote the next time, because they're more thinking about their own benefit from that administration and not thinking about someone else. And that's just the culture that we're raised in. You know, I don't want to vilify anyone for doing that, because we are more an individualist culture than collectivist. But I wonder if America started being more collectivist, if that would affect how many people vote. If we started prioritizing caring about each other more.
Yeah, I would have to say, because, you know, as an anti-racist and as a anti-racist abolitionist, because there's a lot of abolitionists and they're super racist. Part of the work that we're working to do is to change this individualistic narrative that is a tool of white supremacy and white oppression and whiteness. And not saying that only white folks do this, but it is a tool, right? And this is a fallback on what white bodies and white folks do. So when you say privilege, we automatically think of those privileged groups when it comes to social economic status and class more often than not. And then we'll have, like, you know, the folks that are just the outliers of non-privileged groups, but they're closer to privilege, so they think that they're privileged, you know, and they're respectability, they make it through tokenized, you know, gates and things like that. But then I also have to think about my identity as a black millennial, right? And so the one thing about millennials is that we are very vocal about how we feel and think about everything. And luckily that passed down to, you know, the next generation, and y'all just do it better than we do.
We're very vocal.
But much akin to your, Macy, your political cartoon that you were talking about, there's a lot of Black folks, and I've also noticed in my queer community that is very intergenerational and very multicultural, but where I'm around a lot of non-binary and trans bodies as well. And so, like, no matter what their race is, and what we're establishing is that we really feel like that larger collective of people that are like, well, what am I going to vote for? There's never anyone that actually cares about Black trans women, right? Like, you know, we had politicians that were like running with campaigns that were for the betterment of Black trans women's lives, then like everybody else would have like some kind of thing too, but they would just be included, and that would be the difference. And so for me, I think sometimes it even goes past privileged spaces and it goes towards those of us who are smart enough and are like, hey, or either smart enough or like have to know what's happening when you're oppressed. Where it's like, you know, I really struggle with one of obviously this current regime, but I really struggle with Kamala Harris because of her past action against Black lives. I really struggle with Biden because of his erasure of his over sexualization of women and some of his things that he's done to women and femme bodies, as well as his criminalization of Black bodies in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
I also know that when in 2004, I used to be very problematic, and now I'm like holistic, like doing yoga and stuff. So there is ways for people to change, and I think about that. So I think like that's also part of it for me, like why I see like so many people not voting, and that goes back to me like you have to just run the right people. But then so that and so we're running up on our last 15 minutes. And so I keep going back to this, but I think it's because I'm really, really curious as to what if we got, right, in the next 4 years, we got the voting age dropped to 16. What do you think we would be able to do with something in America, no matter what happens in this current election, in the next 4 years, if we got 16-year-olds to be able so that means 16 and 17-year-olds can now vote, right? What would that mean? What do you think that would mean? What do you think could happen from something like that? Yes.
I just keep doing that. Maybe just they elect people that see more of their values, or if that makes sense, because I feel like Gen Z and stuff have been like so outspoken of the protests happening, and like have been from whether it's Native Americans, Black Lives Matter, Black trans women, like, you know, the sad murders of those, like we have been so outspoken about them. So it could be like where we vote for people like that, or, you know, in my opinion, in 4 years, like maybe not like for at a president level, but at like a town level or a state level, we just see more people represent us like where we live. Because I feel like that is also very important, you know, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. I also feel like we could justify then what we were talking about earlier with bringing people into even high schools to register people to vote. What cracks me up, and that's sarcastic because it's not actually funny, but what cracks me up is the irony of if you're male in America, as soon as you're 18, you automatically have to register for the draft, but you don't have to automatically register to vote. Why not just automatically register the entire country so then we don't have to go through figuring out, am I registered? How do I register? All this, like you're just automatically, like there's other countries that do that. And that comes back to voter suppression, and like that touches on every single theme that we've been talking about like this entire time.
Yes.
So I think the reason that certain people don't want the voting age lowered is because of the domino effect that would cause that I just mentioned. Because people who oppose lowering the voting age are also the people who may participate in certain types of voter suppression. I think there is a correlation between those things and certain political views. Maybe that's my opinion. Not implying anything or anything like that, but I'm implying some stuff. It's implied.
All implied and not meant, you know. And so I think I wanna begin our closing with an intentional question for each one of you, and feel free to take up as much space because we have 15. Well, I'm fibbing, like 12 minutes to do that, right? And so I'm gonna lead in with you first, Max. So and we kind of alluded to this already. This election, you're not able to vote, but the next election you will be. But what would you leave for the folks who are watching who can vote right now? What would you want to say to them that you feel like, okay, I know you may not want to vote, but you can vote, and this is what I want to leave you with as to why it's important to you to vote and for us to use our power.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just gonna, please vote. Like, I know it's stressful. I know there's probably a million thoughts going through your head about what the future may look like, but you have the choice to choose that future. I don't have that choice. My friends don't have that choice. My schoolmates do not have that choice. So your choice is important. And if you feel like you are in the right headspace to use that privilege, then please do. Because I cannot make that choice, no matter how much I want to, and no matter how much I would love to make that choice for me and my like Black trans sisters and just everyone. I cannot make that choice. So please, if you are eligible, please make that choice. Like, I'm talking to you not as someone who wants you to vote for one side or like politically, just as a person, like as a transgender son of an immigrant person. Please vote, because it is very important. So thank you. That is what I have to say to people who can vote.
Thank you so much. And so, Macy, your question is just a smidge different, right? Because like you are going to go and exercise your vote. And so I would say, what can you leave our folks in the community who are still like, I'm probably not gonna go vote, or F it, I don't think that my vote matters. What can you leave, especially because most of our folks watching are queer bodies, right? And there's a lot of queer people that are still saying this. I don't know how, but there are. What could you leave our trans, queer, all of our queer family? Like, what would you please and encourage them or offer them for those of us who are saying that they're not going to vote still?
It's cool to vote. It's like, it's actually like, it's pretty cool because you get to, I remember the first time I voted, you know, I had never seen, because, you know, I never went with my parents to go vote because voting is a personal and private matter. So I had never seen, you know, the setup of all the booths and everything. And I had never seen all that stuff until I was almost 18 years old. And it was just like, it's cool. Like everything that Max said is what I would say. Like, please vote, because one of two people is going to be the president, and that's a fact. And so we already have 4 years of experience with one person. And if you don't like that, then you need to vote. Mm-hmm. If you have been through 4 years of the Trump presidency, and if you yourself think I didn't like that and you don't vote, then that 4 years was for nothing. And your opinion was for nothing. And not that your opinion doesn't matter. Your opinion matters, but you need to use it.
Macy, I'm about to hire you to make one-liners for my t-shirts because you come to one-liners. Voting's cool.
Voting is cool. Yes. And by a difference, my personal opinion is I think it's uncool not to vote, because I have met people who are very proud of the fact that they don't care about politics. I'm like, I don't think that's something that you should be proud of.
Right.
It's your civic duty, and it's your personal duty as an American and as a brother, sister, or sibling to all other Americans that you care about, or even ones that you don't know. Like, we should be voting for the betterment of everyone, not just someone like ourselves or someone that we do know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Beautifully said. My goodness.
Yes, Max. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I just said beautifully said. And to kind of go back on that, like you were talking about individualism, like that hits at the mark. Like, we need to listen to each other. We need to sit down and talk. And that's the kind of point that I wanted to bring up. So like Justin coming to our class, I know I keep talking about Justin, but like him coming to our class, it wasn't individualistic. It was commutative, because we had an actual representative talk to us, like talk to our like as teenagers, and it made me feel like I was valid. So I feel like senators, politicians, like justice at the Supreme Court, they are held at such a high power. They have that title, right? But like, what would happen if they came down from that title and talked? They just listened to us. They listened to the people. Because when you're at that title, you haven't felt that. Like, no matter where you come from, you haven't felt that in so long. So if we just become less individualistic, I feel like that could impact the American like democracy so much more. And I know Macy was saying that. That was like beautifully said. So
and something that you said, Max, about like meeting people. Like I've met Joe Courtney, for instance, and that was a very formative experience for me because I was like, oh, he's a real person. And I had the chance to speak with him individually, and I was like 15, so I didn't say much else but like, whoa, you're Joe Courtney. But he is a real person who you can talk to face, and right. He has conversations with people every day, and he has a family, and he has a life, and he's a real human person.
Yeah.
And so I think young people especially feel really disconnected from politics because not only do we not see ourselves, but we've never met any of the people who have control over us.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't seem like real people.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, yes. I'm also plug Black Lives Matter New Haven, one of the co-founders, and we've been doing some Black Lives Matter murals. And I was talking to our mayor at the thing, and like, I'm really familial with our mayor because we lost Max. Oh no. Max will be back. And after a younger person was like, you were just talking to the mayor. And I was like, yeah, I talk to Justin all the time. I be texting him. He gets cussed out by me once a month and he understands. And then I was like, yeah, we voted for him. He better talk to us. As a matter of fact, you want to go meet him? And I realized in that moment that I, as an organizer, am used to meeting these folks. Like I talk to Chris Murphy a lot. Like I talk to like senators, and I love Justin Farmer and Gary Winfield and Robin Porter are like my mentors in real life. So I have a privilege, right, in like knowing politicians and understanding them, but forgetting that other folks. It's like Hollywood all over again. It's like if you're not a Hollywood star, you're a politician, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like after that, it's athletes. That's it. And so recognizing that and humanizing these folks enough to have an ongoing conversations, I think also will do something well. Because I tell Justin all the time, you better work with these young people. They about to start voting, sir. And so we're going to start our close. We lost Max. Hopefully Max will be able to join us again. Max internet just went out. Oh no.
Well, it was lovely having Max while he was here.
I am so sorry. I think my Wi-Fi just like died on me. I was like frantically trying to connect it. I think it's on my hotspot. I am so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's I always say that we don't have. It's not a good panel if we don't have at least one tech problem during the panel. And I thought we were making it without. So I was like, oh no, maybe this panel was bad. But there you go. Thank you, Max. So our panel. So I just want to thank y'all so much. I want to just center the fact that this is the reason why we're doing these panel series, the youth programming at New Haven Pride Center, because you young folks are the experts. Y'all have all the answers that we need. And we really want to model that for other folks who really still try to practice ageism. And so thank you so much for taking time out of this halfway gloomy Saturday.
It's pretty gloomy over here.
Yeah, we got a moment or two, we got a couple more minutes. So if anyone that is watching, tune in, put your last minute comment. If you have a question that's really burning and you want to talk to our experts, put your question. You got a couple more minutes. I want to say thank you so much. We have 2 panels every month at New Haven Pride Center for our youth panels. We have amazing programming. Yes, please check out newhavenpridecenter.org/youth. Please follow our IG. Thank you at Youth NHPC. Come to our Instagram. We have a Twitter. We have YouTube, so you can come back. You can share these panels with your folks who weren't able to watch it. But please follow us. We have a bunch of amazing programs. November coming up is Trans Awareness Month. We have amazing panels coming up for that. We have some amazing stuff happening for the rest of this year going into next year. So if you have any questions, you want to connect with me, anyone out there in the virtual world, please email me at youth@newhavenpricecenter.org. We are here. We are queer, and we ain't going nowhere. Before we end, I want to bring my amazing ED Patrick on to give us some more update.
Hey everyone. Thank you to our amazing youth. We always love having your voices as part of our programming. I really appreciate both of you sharing your expertise with us. I'm here to make a quick pitch. The New Haven Pride Center, we're a nonprofit organization based here in Greater New Haven. And we've been very fortunate throughout COVID to receive some incredible support. And one of the things that we just got was a national grant for $25,000 that we're trying to match. So if you have $1 or $2 or $5 or $10 and you want to double its value, you can give it to the New Haven Pride Center right now. So you can go to newhavenpridecenter.org/donate. Or if you're like, oh, that's too much, I can't do that, you can go to our Venmo or our Cash App and make a donation that way at New Haven Pride Center or $ New Haven Pride Center. Like I said, every dollar gets matched 1-to-1. So even $1 becomes $2, and that can go a long way. And again, I want to thank Allah for always putting together really thoughtful, amazing panels and our amazing experts here with us today who are making a difference and giving voice. And I look forward to seeing both of y'all in politics. But I'm going to leave it with you, Allah, to give the final words.
Just want to say that all our panelists, our experts that you see come to each and every one of our panels, not just our youth panels, but all our panels are always paid. And so in order to continue to create this sustainable program, and please donate to us so we can make sure that we keep paying our youth experts. Right there, newhavenpricecenter.org/donate, or yes, @ New Haven Pride Center on Venmo, or New Haven Pride Center on Cash App. Thank you so much to our viewers. Thank you so much to our amazing experts. This is not going to be the last time that you see these amazing humans in front of you, folks. So again, thank you so much, Max and Macy. And I love y'all so much. Have a great day. And make sure y'all go out and vote.